I normally have a lectern. So I'm a professor at UT Austin in the Human Development and Family Sciences Department. And I'm a professor of psychology. Well, no, sorry. I'm a professor of Human Development and Family Sciences. I have my PhD in psychology, and I study close relationships, specifically couples while they're navigating stressors and how to give effective social support. So I'm sure you've all, well, most of you have heard the, first comes love, and then comes marriage, then we all know, for some people, a baby carriage. These are all big transitions in adult people's lives. In the United States, almost everybody falls in love at some point in time in their life. And in the United States, we are still marrying at a very high rate as compared to other like European cultures and things. So we are marrying less than we used to even 10 years ago, and we are certainly marrying later in life, but we are still getting married. And we are still having kids. And it turns out that we can think, marriage, falling in love, getting married, having kids are considered by many to be joyous occasions. And they bring a lot of joy to a lot of people, but they are also very stressful. And after these events, we see declines in relationship satisfaction for the couples who are going through them. So for those of you who have perhaps planned a wedding or had children or have children, you may be very well aware of the stress that often comes with these events. Currently, in my research, right now we're collecting data on a different type of transition for parents and children, which is parents no longer having those children at home, so transitioning to an empty nest. So going from having children and taking care of your children as being one of your primary jobs as a couple to no longer having that, and maybe having to reconnect as a couple again, and the stress that may arise there. And of course, there are many other transitions that we go through in our lives in which our partners often play a very big role, including starting to care for aging parents, starting to care for aging partners, bereavement, job loss. I mean, there are just endless types of large transitional stressors that we go through in our adult life. And when we're going through those, one of the things that can really benefit us throughout all of these transitions and just generally is social support. And so that is what I study in my research lab, is how our social support exchanges with our partners can help and actually sometimes hurt our attempts to navigate these stressors successfully. And so these are just some of the transitions that I've studied in my career. So I've studied work transitions, like qualifying for large exams and how partners support each other through that, like things, the bar exam or something like that, so a qualifying exam. I worked at Karmanos Cancer Institute in Detroit, Michigan, where we were studying how families and couples support each other through cancer diagnoses and cancer treatment plans. We conducted a study here when everybody was suddenly at home and not allowed to leave their home to do much of anything for several weeks. We studied couples who were suddenly together a lot more time than they had been ever previously in many cases. And we studied them then, and then we followed up later when restrictions had gotten a little bit more lax. And just briefly, I'll tell you that what we found there is that if couples blamed the quarantine and the pandemic for the problems that they were having with their partner, they remained happy in their relationship. If they blamed their partner, they did not, right? So we saw that the same behaviors in a relationship, if the partners were like, this isn't their fault that they're so annoying. The fault is that we have to be in this house together all the time. Then they were able to maybe forgive and forget much more easily than those who were like, no, it's not the pandemic, it's that they are annoying. So, not surprising, but this is something that therapists and have been suggesting for years, but we didn't actually have much data that would suggest that if you blame something outside of your relationship or outside of your partner for when things are going wrong, if you put more of the blame outside, that you will be able to handle that better and recover from it more quickly. There are caveats there, but not something that has been talked about in a therapeutic setting for a long time, but we didn't have a lot of data that supported it. So this study did that. I also studied the transition to parenthood. I've spent a lot of time studying the transition to parenthood. And as I said, I'm now starting a study on the transition to empty nest. So in this context, as I said, I really focus on social support. It turns out that social support is really great. Social support has been associated with any number of beneficial outcomes. Almost if you can name it, I can say that social support has been shown to be beneficial. So if you are somebody who thinks, I have a lot of social support in my life, I have a lot of people who will be there for me when I need them, who will come and see me give a talk, that kind of thing, good friends like that, then we find that you are healthier, happier, you make more money, you are more fulfilled. All just numerous outcomes are associated with you being highly supported. And in fact, this is a study that almost every talk I go to in my department that talks about social relationships and health in any way, our families and health in any way, shows this graph. And there's a reason for it. This graph is showing you reductions in mortality risk. So it's literally saying, what is the benefit of physical activity on mortality risk? Well, it decreases mortality risk by about 30%. Okay, so that's what that's showing. It's saying, hey, we all have been told, and I think we all probably believe, that being a physically active person is good for our health. This is showing you that being physically active is beneficial to your health in that it makes you less likely to die earlier. Okay? This is the effect of smoking versus not smoking. So being a smoker and stopping, this is the reduction in mortality risk. The top one that's highlighted there. Abstinence versus excessive drinking, that's the reduction in mortality. That's your reduction of mortality risk there. These top three bars, the largest effects on here are the effect of having good social relationships. So that second and third one in particular are literally, if you have high support versus a low support person, being that high support person, we're going to see a reduction in mortality risk that is twice the size of the reduction in mortality risk for physical activity. So yes, please exercise, but do it with friends, is what this is saying, right? Join a team. Be social, hang out with nerds, that kind of thing. It's really good for us. You will live longer. But there is this paradox of social support. And this paradox is that, again, being somebody with a lot of support, perceiving yourself as somebody who has a lot of support and reporting that to us is associated with all these beneficial outcomes. But then when I go into the lab or I give surveys and I ask people about specific instances of support that they receive, or I manipulate the support that they're receiving in the lab, I often see that social support actually increases their anxiety and increases their depressed mood and makes them feel less capable rather than more capable. So what's happening? If social support is so good for us, why is the social support that I'm actually seeing people give, or they're reporting giving, having these negative outcomes? And that's what I've been studying, which is the idea that we're not that good at giving support, and we might not be that good at receiving it. So how can we be better at giving support? And there's a few things that have come up in the field. I'm going to talk about, the thing's over here. It's not over here. So two types of skilled support that I've done some research on, but it's not my primary area, are called invisible support and match support. I'm going to talk about match support first. If you are having a problem, let's say you're very nervous about giving a talk, even though you give lectures every week to 200 students, somehow or another, changing the setting and the people really, is nerve-wracking. So you might, ask your partner, you might tell your partner, like, hey, I'm nervous about giving this talk. I'm not sure that, I'm going to be giving the kind of talk they're looking for, or however it is you want to talk about it. And maybe your partner will respond with some social support. What kind of social support do you think? I'm not trying to get anybody to implicate your own partner. Let's implicate mine. What kind of support do you think my partner might be most likely to give me in that situation? Yes, advice. Well, I think that if you want to give a good talk, you should practice it a lot, or make sure you're not saying a lot, or, any number of pieces of advice that they might give me. It turns out that actually we have this idea in our culture that men like getting advice and like giving advice, and that women don't like getting advice. Nonsense. No one likes getting advice, and everybody likes giving it. If we look, we see that, hey, what kind of support are people most likely to give? Advice. What's the type of support most people don't want? Advice. So it's not because you're a man, it's not because you're a woman. We are the same. Nobody likes it. Stop doing it. Instead, we often just want reassurance. We want someone to listen, and those are the types of things. Now, every once in a while, you're looking for advice, and that's fine. But it turns out that even when you're looking for advice, and you get the advice, and you tell us you take it, we find that, no, you don't. You really don't use it. So advice really is a tricky one. Invisible support, on the other hand, is this idea of being able to give support without your partner noticing. So this is the way that I think about it. I'm going to do it in the form of a compliment, because I think oftentimes social support is basically just saying something nice to our partners, like, no, you look wonderful, or I think you did a great job, or I'm sure it's going to be okay, right? We're giving them encouragement. So if you were imagining, your partner coming up and telling you, hey, after you gave a talk or did something that you find, stress-inducing, and said, hey, you did a great job. I was so impressed. I think everybody really liked it. I'm sure that would feel good. I would like it if my partner said that to me. That would be nice. I didn't let him come, so he can't say that to me. But it would probably feel even better if what my partner said to me was, oh, the people sitting next to me at the next table were talking about how much they liked your talk and what a good job you did, right? Because then it doesn't feel like he's just trying to be nice to me, right? It feels like unbiased information. That's invisible support. I wouldn't necessarily think of it as him giving me support, so I am more receptive to that support. That's the idea of invisible support. It doesn't have to always be the idea that you say, oh, I heard somebody else say. You can give invisible support in other ways. For instance, I think many of us can probably relate to the idea of, we see our partners having a tough day, and we're like, I know, I'll do the dishes, even though it's not my night to do the dishes. And so we do the dishes, and maybe our partner doesn't even notice it because they are so busy and distracted and worried about this other thing. And if we can refrain from pointing out to them that we did the dishes, because we do like to get credit for these things, if we can refrain from doing that, that support will be more effective. Doing the dishes for your partner and pointing out that you're doing the dishes for your partner, not so great. Doing the dishes and just letting it lie, great. Do that. That's invisible support. Oh, yeah, again, over here. Okay. Now, I've spent a lot of time looking at what I call reciprocal support. And that is the idea that support tends to be better if it's a mutual exchange. And so I'm going to talk about a specific study to talk to you about how I've looked at this in one context. So I'm going to get this. My lab is called the Daily Living Project, and this particular study was we called Becoming Parents. And again, oh, cute babies, cute babies. My graduate student just had a baby, and other people's babies are the cutest babies. I love that little baby, and I feel terrible for how tired she is, because babies are hard and exhausting. And actually, if you read about how people do interrogations where they don't let people sleep and they make loud noises, that's having a newborn. Very stressful time period for new parents. And it's actually a really great stressor for us to study because it's a shared stressor. Both members of the couple are going through it together. And we have a lot of forewarning as to when it's typically going to take place, right? So typically we've got at least a 9-month warning before that transition happens. So we can recruit couples before they've had the baby and then after they've had the baby and look at how things change. And one of the things that we've learned is that relationship satisfaction decreases much faster for couples who have a baby than couples who don't, which you might say, well, decreases faster, because yes, once you get married, all we see for the most part, some people's relationship satisfaction stays the same, but for most people's, it's just a downward slope. Happy or not, we just see them becoming slightly less happy. Okay, so I'm going to show you, this is actually not from a study I conducted, but just to show you this decline. This is from a study of newlyweds, and this was 3 months, about 27 months, 34, and 39 months after getting married. And what you can see, and I decided to put this in terms that I felt like Nerd Nite would relate to, this would be giving your marital satisfaction an A-, and in 4 years, you're giving it a B. Okay, that's about the decline. For wives in this who didn't have children, we saw about a 3% decline, and for husbands, we saw about a 6% decline. But when we look at dads, and they are having a baby with their wife right about here, okay? What we see is that for both dads and moms, we see a 10% decline in marital satisfaction. They go from, moms go from an A all the way down to a B-. I mean, they really sloughing off that semester is what I'm going to say, right? So, and dads, it was a similar decline. And what you also notice here is that the moms had a higher grade to begin with. And it turns out that we see that women who are happier in their marriage are more likely to have children early in their marriage. And then they're less happy. So, equals out. What do we think is going on here? Well, part of this might be, shifts in roles and in equity in the relationship. We know that even with very involved, even when both partners are very involved, there is a primary caretaker in women with men that tends to be the women. But even in same gender relationships, there's typically a primary caregiver who takes on the bulk of the parenting role. And so that shift in equity in the relationship can make a difference. And I was specifically interested in what this might mean for support exchanges and for the effectiveness of our support in our close relationships. And so what I did was I collected 3 waves of diaries. And this is that I recruited couples who were about to have their first child together when they were in their 3rd trimester, and then they completed surveys when they were 12 weeks post-birth and then a year post-birth. And what the diary is that every night they took a short survey in which they answered multiple choice question kind of things about their day. And what I investigated was, well, first of all, I just wanted to show you that my sample, like that other sample, my couples are indeed becoming less satisfied across this transition. Again, about a 10% decline in their overall satisfaction in the 1.5 years that I'm following them. And then I looked at the support across the transition. And what we're seeing here is that on days when you don't receive support for mothers, you can see that their negative mood is somewhat in between days in which they receive support, but they don't provide support. So this is actually, and I know that these look like small differences, but they're daily differences. And so over time, if you are continually having more negative mood in a given day, it does compound upon itself. And what we see is that the days in which mothers report the most exacerbated negative mood is the days in when they only receive support. But the days in which they report the least amount of negative mood is when they receive support and they provide support to their partner. And that's what I call supportive reciprocity. And that is also true. So this is true of both the mothers and the fathers. The days in which they report the least amount of negative mood and the most amount of positive mood are on days in which they not only receive support, but they also provide that support. So in trying to understand this, we're like, well, what is it about a support exchange that makes the support more beneficial? And I turned to the idea of self-efficacy or personal control. So this is an idea that an important aspect of stress and how we cope with stress is our feeling of control over that stress. Are we capable? Are we in control? Can we handle that stressor? And when we have that belief, we tend to engage in more proactive behaviors, and we tend to have less anxiety and more positivity. Oh, I'm never going to learn this. Those with less control, on the other hand, people who feel out of control with a stressor, can feel like their incompetencies are highlighted, and it can lead to maladaptive cognitions in which they are sort of having these repeated negative thoughts, repeated negative self-talk about their capabilities to handle the situation. And so one of the things that I thought was happening with supportive reciprocity is that if I'm stressed and worried about something and my partner gives me support, but then my partner also reaches out to me for support, or I see a way in which I might be able to support my partner, I'm showing to myself and to my partner that I am a competent and capable person, that I can affect my situation, and I can feel good about that. And then what might be happening then, the reason it might be particularly beneficial is not just that I have done that for my partner, but then I might be more accepting of the support and benefit that they're providing for me. Thank you. And so I tested this, and what I found was just that. So I'm sorry, these are very nerdy graphs. It's from a publication in a journal, an academic journal that no one ever reads. So, and so what I literally measured was daily locus of control. So just how in control did you feel that day? How much did you feel like you were able to make decisions about how your day was going? You were able to handle problems that came up. You felt in charge of your own life and your own circumstances in that day. And we actually find this both for a given day of control and your overall sense of control, but I'm just showing you the daily. But what this shows is that on days when you don't feel very efficacious, when you don't feel in control, supportive reciprocity is really important. That was true for both mothers and fathers. But on days, and then that was still true for days in which you felt sort of a normal amount of control. But for days in which you felt a high, when you felt a high level of control, basically it didn't matter what was happening with support, right? So if I feel in control, then I don't need to have reciprocal support for it to be beneficial, because I already am going to be either less in need of support because I feel like I have it under control, or more open to receiving help because we think what's happening is that those incompetencies or those concerns about our ability to handle it are dampened, and so that social support isn't sort of bringing out that fear or worry about our incompetencies. And so it seems that another way of thinking about this is that support does not necessarily buffer our stress. Support from our partners does not necessarily buffer our stress on a daily basis. That's one thing. Oh, and something I didn't show you from this is, even though I'm studying the transition to parenthood and then I completely neglected to talk about that transition, sorry, the reason that that is the case is this is a 20-minute talk, and it turns out that nothing changed. Okay? The way that the support exchanges worked across the transition to parenthood was the same before the birth and the same after the birth. What did change was how often reciprocal support occurred, how often they reported that occurring, and it went down, right? So that could be part of, so it's not that people are reacting differently to the support that they're receiving, but it might be that their patterns of support are changing a bit. All right, it might, and so this study, my conclusions were that support does not necessarily buffer our daily stress, and that the cost of social support might in part be due to exacerbating or highlighting our feelings of incompetence on days in which we don't feel in control. And then lastly, and I think this one is a little bit too bad, or very too bad, I guess, is that unfortunately, those who need the support the most may be the ones least likely to benefit from it, right? On those days where you're struggling and you don't feel in control are the days that you might actually be least receptive to the support that is being offered to you by your partner. Now, on those days in which we're feeling that way, it might be very hard for our partners, it might be very hard for us to do much about that. But what I think we can do as partners is that when we see our partners going through a tough time and we kind of notice that we're kind of trying to help them and they haven't been doing we should provide them with opportunities to help us too, right? Like that, a lot of times we try to protect our partners when they're under a lot of stress. And I think that there are times where that's appropriate. But also showing that you still value your partner, that you still need them might be beneficial for them. And that's something that as partners that we can actually, don't think that asking your partner for support is going to be a burden on them. It actually seems like that can be a benefit. Now, all things in moderation, as we know, but might be something there. So, and then I want to say one caveat, which is that when we think about stress, we often think of it as when we think about support, we often think about it as a buffer for stress. And so in the field, we're often looking at how people are coping, anxiety, performance, and these kinds of things. But what is nice about support, and probably where that benefit of perceived support comes in, is that even if the support we're receiving from our partners is making us more anxious, it typically makes us feel closer and more loved. And that is probably where our long-term benefit of social support comes from. So it's not necessarily helping us deal with that stressor, but it is making us feel more secure and loved in the long run. So one thing that my research and other people's research really suggests is that giving support is extremely beneficial. Some neuropsychologists found that when they put people in an MRI and they gave them an opportunity to support their partner when their partner was getting shocked, is that if they were holding their partner's hand when they thought their partner was getting shocked, the reward regions of their brain lit up, right? So when their partner is being shocked, but they get to hold their hand, that's rewarding because they're helping. It's not that they were happy their partner was getting shocked, because if they weren't holding their hand and their partner got shocked, that wasn't rewarding, okay? So really seems to be about the shock and the hand holding, because that makes the shock so much better, is holding the hand of your partner who's in a giant scanner. Anyway, psychology is fun. Giving support, so we saw how having a social network, having good social support reduces our mortality risk. It turns out that giving support is highly related to reduced mortality risk too. Specifically, we see this in many different ways, particularly in older adults who engage in caregiving tasks or volunteering. We see a strong correlation with longevity, even controlling for other health risks. And as I've shown in my research, that giving support often wipes away any negative effects of receipt or support and actually tends to enhance the positives of that receipt of support. And so just in conclusion, I will leave you with the idea that it is entirely possible that the power of relationships is not in making us feel loved, but in making us feel needed by someone we love. And so, the old adage, 'tis better to give than to receive, my research certainly suggests that that may indeed be true. So thank you, and thank you to all my collaborators. And if you have any questions you don't want to ask tonight, you can email me at UT. So thanks. My students just shout at me, so.
Okay. All right. That was exciting. It kept on trying to come apart a little bit, so that was fun. So I heard some people laughing at your jokes at appropriate moments during your talk, so I think that was a good talk.
Thank you.
I'm trying to apply what I've learned. Mm-hmm. So the way that we're going to do questions, like I said earlier, is that we're going to work the room a little bit. I tried to load Twitch up on my phone, and my phone did not play ball with me, so we have one? Okay, never mind. All right, Mickey's on the case. I'm feeling good about this.
And I just want to say you're doing an excellent job emceeing. So.
Thank you. But did you hear someone say that?
No.
Okay.
I haven't.
All right.
Stage yet. I did. I heard someone say it.
All right. I feel very supported right now. This is good. All right. So before we get into the Q&A, though, there is an announcement I need to make for housekeeping purposes. The kitchen is now closed, so if you didn't order food, you messed up. But if you did order food, I'm sure it's still coming out if it's not out already. So with that being said, we've done the mutual affirmation and supportiveness. We've done the housekeeping announcement. I had my fun with the microphone. So now it is time for questions. Raise your hand, ask a good one. Who wants to start? Who's feeling real questionable? I want to start with you.
Hi. So you mentioned earlier quite a bit that marriage, people who get married, their relationship satisfaction goes down. So if you are in a long-term partnership and you don't get married, do you see the same results? Like, do they also go down?
Yes.
Okay. So it doesn't matter either way.
Yeah, I mean, the actual wedding seems to be a stressor, right? But no, it really, the issue really just seems to be length of time in a relationship.
Thank you.
Now, to be fair, it's actually kind of hard to isolate various things, right? Because what we're doing is we're measuring relationships. And so if I were to take everybody in this room who's in a couple and I were to ask you all how happy you are in your relationship right now, and then to continue measuring you over time, I would see your trajectories. But some of you would break up, right? And those trajectories are there then still in my data, right? So it is, some of that decline really is driven by relationships that aren't gonna last, right? So we do see, if you analyze this longitudinal data, we do see actually a fair amount of couples who remain remain highly satisfied. That's what we see is that there are different sort of trajectories of groups, right? But because we don't know all the time when we're looking at longitudinal data who's going to stay together and who's going to break up and that kind of thing, when we're looking at the general trends, we do see this downward decline. But that does hide a lot of variability, and it hides successful relationships and unsuccessful relationships.
All right, that was an excellent question to start out with. So who's up next? Oh, gosh. I want to let Mickey pull rank. All right, here we go.
All right. So have you done any studies as to the effect of pets on relationships? They're better than kids, right?
So I haven't. Other researchers have. I will say that the research on whether pets are actually beneficial for well-being is actually fairly mixed in what I've seen coming out recently. But the research that I really love about pets is actually about social support. And this research was actually conducted a while ago, but they went to people's homes and they had the people do a stressful task. We have a variety of different stressful tasks that we make people do. One of them is often giving a speech. People really don't like public speaking. Jerry Seinfeld has a joke that the number one fear of Americans is public speaking. Number two is death. So they'd rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy. As psychologists, we use that fear of public speaking a lot. So we'll go to people's homes and we'll give them this difficult task, which often involves having to get up and perform difficult math problems in front of other people. And we will either let them do that task with their partner in the room, their pet in the room, or no one in the room. And they do best with their pet, and they do worst with their partner. And we think what's happening is your pet loves you no matter how good you are at math.
All right, so we're 2 for 2 on good questions. Let's see what our third question is. All right, here you go.
This one might be a bit more of a personal question, so I'll leave it up to you as to the extent of how much you want to answer. But with your expertise, has this come up in your relationship and given you any strength in certain scenarios?
Okay, so this I do get asked this a lot. That people will be like, you must be such a great partner. That's why I don't let my partner come to these things. Because yes, I am. I'm the best. Woo! Should all be married to me. No, I actually think that what being an expert does is make you really annoying, right? So, Because what you really want when you're having a conflict with your spouse is for them to be like, that's a really negative behavior. It's really not okay to do that. That's really like, that's one of the, we actually have this, we use this term in relationship science. That's one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse of conflict, right? Like, so, no, I don't think it makes me a worse partner. I think it can make me, I think I'm okay at giving social support. But I do think that knowing too much about something can also be really obnoxious. And so, I can't say that I think it really helps a lot. And also it makes me like perseverate on things and be like, are we doing okay? Like, which of these groups are we in? I'm also an academic, right? I mean, there's just a lot of things that make me not the best.
Okay, I think we're looking for our next question at this point, so you don't dig a further hole. Let's see what we got here. All right, I think we're going to go with gentleman in the red glasses.
Okay. Some research that I saw a long time ago suggested that that people in the United States, starting at age 20, they start losing happiness until about age 50, and then it turns around, they start getting happy again. Is there, what you showed was on the order of about 4 years, and so what does it look like long term, and does it seem to follow that same trend that at some point there's actually a turnaround where people start liking each other again?
So it used to be that when we were looking at cross-sectional data, what we would always see is this, and cross-sectional data means that we're looking at data, like we would survey, the whole community, let's say, and we would have people's marital satisfaction who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, but they're not the same people over time, right? So you're just getting a snapshot of where everybody is. And what we would see is a U-shaped curve, right? So people were happiest younger in their relationship, and then in their 40s and 50s, they're the least happy, and then they seem to get happier at the end of their relationship. But if you actually follow couples over time, you tend not to see that U-shaped curve. And I think it would probably be true for individuals too. Although in late life, people do tend to be more mellow. We can all think of counterexamples. But we do see, for the most part, that people tend to to be a little bit calmer. But again, there's this confound of who makes it out to 60 years of marriage, right? So it's really difficult to tease apart where this is coming from. And again, we really do see these different trajectories of people who maintain some happiness throughout. And we also, it's very normal to go through up and down periods. Also, interestingly, when you think about, I don't think that most couples are miserable. That is not my impression. I actually think relationships are really beneficial for us. And, I think healthy relationships are really beneficial for us. One of the things that we see is that when you ask people about how happy they are now, they will often tell you about how they are happier now than they were before, even if our measures say that's not so, right? So I think a lot of it is also, pay less attention to the number and more about the perception of where you think you are on your trajectory and how you're holding on. And that, I think, is probably a better measure of how people are actually doing.
All right, so we have time for one more question. Who has the best one?
No pressure.
Oh.
Who has the easiest one?
Okay, all right. Who has the easiest question? If people are faltering, they're not sure. Okay. I don't think that we've gotten a question from you before, so let's give it a try. What you got?
Did you find any difference between reciprocal plus matching versus reciprocal plus invisible in terms of effectiveness?
So invisible plus reciprocal is not measurable in the way that we've measured it, because in order for it to be reciprocal, you need to perceive that you received it and that you provided it. In order for it to be invisible, you can't have perceived that you received it. So they are antithetical in that way. I think that matching, I have not found that matching the exact type of support is better than just matching, better than just giving and receiving, right? So I have measured different types of support and seen whether it was important that the exact, like if I used humor to support my partner, was it better if he also used humor to support me rather than something else? And I haven't found that that's better than using something else, right? So it's like matching seems to be beneficial in, if I'm looking for him to use humor, it's good if he uses humor. And then beyond that, it doesn't seem that I need to receive and give the same type of support. Makes sense?
All right, y'all. That was a good set of questions. Nicely done.
Thank you so much.
That was a good set of answers, too. Thank you so much. Let's have a round of applause for our speaker.